I want to bring in my next guest, Fox Nation host Tammy Bruce, one of our favorites here on the U.S. Report. Tammy, welcome to the program. And first of all, I wanted to get your thoughts on Biden's State of the Union address.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's always fun and a pleasure. As you've noted, not a lot of people watched. I was even inquiring with my fans online if they wanted to watch and have a chat room but they didn't even want to hate watch him. It was they anticipated it being boring, and they just figured they'd want that time back when they were on their deathbed. And so it's horrible. Because, look, it's the United States. It's the President of the United States. We're proud of our country. And we feel like we're watching, we're kind of forced to binge watch a really horribly bad television show. And we'd rather be doing something else. And, you know, this is the great thing about the American process. We've got elections every 2 years. But what struck me, because I did watch, because you keep other people from having to do so, what struck me is that the speech, I think, was about 72 minutes long, 75 minutes. He spent all of 2 minutes on China and toward the end. And this is after a week of Americans watching this monstrosity traverse the United States over important military sites, nuclear sites, military bases. We're wondering why that happened, why we allowed it to traverse the entire country. Only to just make sure, of course, that the privacy of the Atlantic Ocean was kept, secure. So we shoot it off. We shoot it down off the coast of South Carolina. So we were wondering, look, this becomes a major national security issue, and he never mentioned it specifically. He also, did not talk about the major issues because he can't, because his policies are, the thing that generated our major problems. So he'd have to acknowledge that they've made some mistakes. This was a very bad campaign speech, and it was unfortunate, but that's where we're at right now, and we've got a lot of work to do in this country.
And indeed, Tammy, even that little bit about China, I have heard, was put in after the balloon when they realized that politically the White House would have to say something about it. But there were other parts, too, that I thought were just scandalous. Have a listen to this bit.
Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. You got it.
Well, I mean, fentanyl was a big issue in the Trump campaign when he was president, but empathy is great, but he refuses to do anything about it. It's pouring in through the southern border, and yet Joe Biden just stands there and smirks. How can he do that?
He smirked. It was remarkable, because this is one of the major issues of why we're arguing. We effectively, it's a failed nation's border on the south. We have no border control. And this means that you've got enough fentanyl, we know, in this last year has come over the border to kill the population of the United States 5 times over. It is a shocking situation. And then he laments it as though it was delivered by leprechauns and it was a surprise. This is a result of his policies, right? And that's why you heard the outrage. Look, he said this after he'd introduced someone who is affected by fentanyl, family who's lost a family member. That is true for at least 70,000 Americans a year. This is a major attack on the Americans in general when it comes to the number of deaths. But it becomes almost like tragedy porn or grief porn, when you use it to maneuver emotions, but then you don't. He could change the situation so quickly. The reversal of all of Donald Trump's policies were simply because they hate him. And they didn't think about whether they were good or bad for the country. Clearly, they wanted to reverse what he had done because there had been success really stopping clearly the illegal immigration with the wall. Trump had an incredible program regarding opioid addiction. It was an excellent focus in that regard. And now we are at this kind of catastrophe that has beset the country. But again, not by accident. This is an unforced error and a decision by this administration. So when he was going into this empathy My goodness, and that's what some people were yelling there in the chamber. This is your fault. This is the border. You know, this is your policies. And that's what Americans understand as well. The crime, the fentanyl, the cartels that now are making so much money, the sex trafficking that goes with that. It is a horrible dynamic that the Biden administration watches. And then when he understands finally what they're saying, he smirks. Now, the American people watching that, of course, were appalled, and they should be. And that's the kind of impression he left with that kind of an exchange.
And how big an issue do you think going into 2024, how big a liability for Joe Biden or whomever the Democrat candidate will be, is the border going to be? How outraged are Americans?
Well, we are outraged, but the problem with the midterm, and this is a lesson for the Republicans and why they're being very aggressive in the House, while the Democrats have misread not doing too badly during the midterms, but that was only because the Republicans had not really articulated why they should be voted for. It has to be more than, you know, vote for us, we're not the other guy. It's like, what is their plan? What are they going to do? And the answer is, and they'd better accept this, is go to the Donald Trump plans that had been implemented and were successful. The Republicans have got to admit this. The American people know what worked. They don't care who implements it. They're worried about their family. We're worried about our future. We're worried about children. We're worried about if our child can walk to school safely. We are sick and tired, not of Donald Trump, but about this petty infighting, and where grown people, adults, are refusing to acknowledge what the solutions are because some guy they might not like also advocated for those solutions, because normal people want the border secured. We want fentanyl to stop. We want opioid addiction to be addressed. We want our schools in better shape. That is a normal human, whether you're in Australia or in America, wherever you are, that is a normal human desire for whether you're a parent, you care about your community, no matter what your life is. And that's what the Republicans have to show in the next 2 years, that they mean business, that they've got a plan, and that they have the solutions.
You know, Tammy, you couldn't have said it better, because that word you keep saying there, normal, I think is the key to so much of politics in America and the U.S. Just be normal. Go with what normal people think, and you're going to win. Finally, Tammy, though, I want to ask you about this question, because I think it goes so much to the heart of how the Biden administration thinks and treats people. Now, they announced that huge boost in funding for the Internal Revenue Service, the tax agency, tens of thousands of new agents that were promised to only target the rich. But guess what? Apparently, they're now coming after waiters and waitresses' tips. Pretty telling, isn't it?
That's right. It is. And funny enough, with the State of the Union address, Biden made a big deal about going after resort fees, junk fees that you pay at Ticketmaster, or for a hotel that you pay a fee, for the gym, or with the airlines. You know, Americans are still struggling with the fact that eggs are costing $8 and $10 a dozen. You know, we're not worried about the vacation right now. We can't afford the vacation. So while he's talking about how he wants to save Americans from junk resort fees, we also learned about the going after the waiters' tips, right? I mean, this was like, but he doesn't mention that, right? So he kind of gaslights the American people with his, I'm going to save you from a fee, while in the meantime, setting up an environment that goes after people who rely on tips. They're in the service industry. They rely on tips in part to pay their rent, to make it from paycheck to paycheck. And this is the ultimate in going after that rock to squeeze more blood out of it. And they keep saying, we're only going to, go after the billionaires and no one under $400,000 a year. And not only with the waiters' tips, but we saw a glimpse of this. This has been put off for a year, going after people's the money they make on Etsy or Venmo or eBay. The people who are hobbyists and trying to make a little extra money, they are now going out. Again, there was such outrage over that. They've put it off for a year, but that will come back more quietly. They are going after the people who respond to a letter from the IRS because they don't have the money for an attorney or to be able to fight. And so that's what those agents in part are doing. They're going to be managing all of this money that comes in, that you send the threatening letter to the average person who has no choice but to send you the money you say they owe the IRS. It's outrageous. This is what the Republicans must work on to stop. It is unacceptable. They should pass a bill already that makes taxing of tips illegal. That's the kind of thing our Congress can do, and that's what they should do.
Amen, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining us on the U.S. Report.